Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Stories That Inspire Us. This is episode number 134. And before we get started, I know that we're probably on a different page. I'm having some Zoom problems. If anyone has any tips for me, please don't hesitate to reach out. So let's get started. You know, sometimes when you meet someone and their story sticks out in your mind, and you just go, oh my God, how did they get through what they went through? And what is so inspiring for me when I met Susan was her ability to share her story in a way that honored her journey, but more importantly, inspires others to use the same by using their voices. Again, good morning, everyone. I'm so excited to introduce and welcome to the Stories podcast, Susan Ball. Susan, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's my true privilege and honor, Janice. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are so welcome. You know, we've talked when we met, I felt like I was sitting across the table, having a cup of coffee with an old friend. And your story is one of many that so many women go through that we so wish that they didn't have to.
Mm.
Being a domestic violence survivor, an abuse recovery mentor, you share your passion as an advocate to help others. I want to go back a little bit, excuse me, to give others a little bit more of a background of your story and why this is like in your heart and soul to do this.
My story is I survived 4 abusive relationships. And in the last one, he attempted to kill me on a wintry night. He strangled me to blacking out. And I woke up, I came to, and I'm very grateful that I came to because obviously. And I knew in that split second I had to get out, and I ran to the police station. He actually pursued me, yelling obscenities and how he was going to kill me. And 2 officers heard it and they opened up the door to wave me in, and they were watching him and they were listening. And one of the officers yelled at him and said, "You need to stop talking." And he basically told him to F off and so on and so forth. And it was a nightmare. But when I got there, of course, they took pictures. There was all of this stuff. They secured my house. They arrested him. There was charges laid. And I went home and I thought we could fix it. That, which is if you speak to domestic abuse survivors, they will say to you in that moment, after that initial adrenaline, I've got to get out of here, we go back to, okay, he was probably just having a bad day. I mean, the one person that we lie to the most is ourselves in these situations. But from that, I had the police told me the house was secure, don't let him in, don't bail him out, etc., etc. I get a knock on my door the following morning. The police officer is pounding on my door, and he's like, "I told you not to bail him out," and I said, "I didn't. I was here all night," and so on and so forth. That's when I found out he had a girlfriend. His girlfriend came and bailed him out. And he said, "She looks very much like you. I'm really sorry." He came in, had a coffee, and apologized. Anyway, all of that to say, I started to make arrangements to get out, leave permanently. He was coming and parking the car in front of the house and putting the headlights on within the 500 meters that he was supposed to be away, and putting the head, blinding me. And I knew that I had to leave. But it was very hard. Even though I knew he had a girlfriend, I knew he had been cheating, he tried to kill me, I had no resources. It was very hard for me to say, "Oh, this is the end." But a friend of mine finally gave me their furnace room. That's where I lived, in a furnace room. I started to drink very heavily and party and that stuff. But one night, a little voice came in my head, and I hated this voice, but it was my motion forward eventually. And it said, "But Susan, who is the common denominator in all your relationships?" And I went, "Oh, Oh, we're not going there. We're not, look, I'm a victim, not going there. But the earworm was set, and I started to really think about myself, what I was accepting, what I was tolerating, what I was doing. Why did I keep doing this? And that's led me to really looking at, if you want to call it your child wound, the gaps, the any issues you had in childhood that are now resonating and causing difficulty in your adult life. That's when I started to look at them, and I realized I had I had been so emotionally and physically abandoned as a child that anybody who said they loved me or wanted to take care of me, I just fell for it, hook, line, and sinker, because I needed that feeling of belonging and somebody wanting me. That's what led me to all of that. It was that that needed to heal. And it was tough. It was really tough to look at that and say, I have a flaw. I have a flaw. And I need to look at that flaw. But it's worth it. It is worth it.
Wow, thank you, by the way, for sharing all of that. Very intimate, very detailed about where you were in your life, but more importantly, looking at the common factor in all these things happening in your life. And when you had mentioned that you were living in a furnace room, I've kind of pictured you sitting in the furnace room and really kind of musing over all that has transpired in your life. And if that little voice didn't come to you at that time, where do you think you would actually be today?
Well, to be honest, I feel, no, I know in my heart, would have been an alcoholic for sure, because I was going down that path I felt very sorry for myself. I was living very much what I say, I was in the very dark corner of my victimhood with black curtains. And I was very happy to stay there because I couldn't figure out why everyone didn't like me, why everyone kept picking on me. And I was very much in that frame of mind. And the only thing that seemed to soothe that was being drunk all the time, because that would help. So I was self-sabotaging with that, which was, not getting me a job, not getting my children back, not doing all of the things that I needed to do. But I felt so sorry for myself. And I really felt that it was just, I was unlovable, unlikable, unworthy. This was my fate for my life. So I would have been an alcoholic or a drug addict or a homeless person. Like it would have been bad. I know that now. I'm grateful for that voice. At the time, I was angry with that voice, like super angry. I think I stomped around for about 2 weeks telling it to shut up, like just stop talking to me like that, because I want to stay here in my little house at the end of the laneway in the victimhood with my black curtains. Don't bug me. But that was not a healthy way to be.
No, I imagine that it definitely was not. And, you've pointed out a couple times the victimhood aspect of what you went through. Like you are being very raw, very honest, but I think you are still respecting your journey in such a way where, okay, this is where I was. I was in victimhood mode. This is where I am now. Have you forgiven yourself though?
Yes. Yes, and just to add a caveat to the forgiveness piece, I know there's a great debate about forgiveness. And I want to put it out there to the people who are listening that there's absolutely no purpose or need to forgive the person who abused you. The forgiveness is about you, is
Hmm.
about forgiving yourself for not knowing what you know now. So I know when I have those moments where I think, uh, well, I'm in a healthy relationship now, but even now, when he leaves for work, sometimes that little girl will pop up and say, he's not coming back. He's going to find another woman. He's not coming back. And that whole abandonment wound. But now I have the tools and the resources to say, no, that's not going to happen. We're good. Everything's good, and move on. Not that long ago, that would have terrorized me, and I would have went into some sort of horrid space, arguing and fighting and doing all of that stuff to get his attention. Now I know that that's not realistic anymore. We have to forgive ourselves for not knowing what we know now. I didn't go into 4 abusive relationships because I thought it was a great idea. I went into it because I was wounded and looking for something that I didn't even know I was looking for, which was belonging and being loved and not being abandoned. That
Hmm.
was the purpose.
So that was the norm for you. That was the norm that you were used to, that you, in some respects, way back then, thrived on.
Correct. And abusers are very good at picking our story. So, and I'll use me as an example. When you first meet someone who has an abusive personality, that's their, signature move, they will spend a lot of time wanting to know about you. And when we're wounded the way I was, that sounds so wonderful. And you might attempt to turn the conversation around and say, well, what about you? Oh, no, let's talk about you. I'm really interested in you. What they're doing is it's like a data bank. They're pulling out things that they can use against you, but in such a way that it feels like love to you.
Hmm.
So for me, a key, and this was when I was going through my healing journey and doing the journaling and all of this stuff, I realized that the key phrase that someone said to me would be, I will never let you down. That was it. That was the one. So to me, that spoke to love, a love that I had never had because my family let me down, my mother let me down, my father let me down. I went to 26 public schools from kindergarten to grade 8 because of all the shifting around. I lived with neighbors. I was constantly like I was an inconvenient child, is what I was. So all of those things, when somebody says to you, you're telling that story, and then they say, I would never let you down. I would never do that to you. No, fills the gap, fills the wound. You're in, you're done, you're in love.
What about your healing journey is so important to you? In other words, you've obviously moved forward with your life. You've forgiven yourself, but you've taken taken such a terrifying and very painful experiences and turned them into a powerful gift. That speaks volumes on so many different levels. What would you say to someone listening to your story right now who is in that gap right now?
I think the most important thing is understanding that healing your child wound, your gap, however you want to phrase it, wherever you're comfortable, is not about blaming and shaming parents. It's not about looking for the big T trauma. It's oftentimes little t trauma that will stick in a child's mind. And it will be the wound. It will become the conversation the child has that leads to these things. Looking at that is not to go after it with the thought of blaming and shaming someone.
Mhm.
It's about learning about yourself. So if you can write at the top of your journal, today I want to learn why I do a certain thing or I behave a certain way. Then you can look at different things from your childhood to answer that question. No blame or shame, just something happened. So I'll give you an example with one of my clients. She was the oldest daughter and, was well loved. It was a quote unquote normal, happy family. And then her brother was born and he was severely disabled. And she was about 6 when he was born. So obviously the parents' attention had to go to this boy. Now, they did their very best to give her attention and do all of those things. But for a child of 6, to suddenly go from getting lots of attention to getting even what would be less than quote unquote normal attention for a first child in a home like that. That becomes abandonment to a
Oh,
child.
mhm.
Children do not have the ability to rationalize what's happening. They only have emotional responses to things up until about the age 8. Then they can start to look and say, ah, mom's just busy. I'll come back later. But when mom is busy and before 8, 7, 8 years old, and we go to show her something and she says, not right now, that can become a story. And
Mm.
then you find more evidence for it as a child, and you think, oh, mom doesn't love me. Mom doesn't have time for me. Mom is preoccupied. So mom hasn't really done anything wrong, but depending on the child's circumstances, this can be small t trauma that grows and grows and grows. So
Mhm.
these are the things that you're looking for. So when she analyzed that, she went, oh, that's why. And she didn't dislike her brother and she didn't dislike her parents and all of that kind of stuff. But digging into that, she found out why she behaves the way she does, because there was a certain lack of emotional connection that she felt with her parents at that time.
Ah, we
So she went looking for it.
Yeah, you're looking for that evidence to justify how you're feeling. That
Yes.
becomes normal.
Yeah. So you just start doing that. Oh, well, I've got to look elsewhere because they're busy, or I've got to look elsewhere because, whatever is happening, they're fighting or whatever it is. Then you start to look elsewhere and that gap grows and grows. And before you know it, you're just following this pattern. So it's like the old gap, the old childhood story comes back, and it controls your adult life without you really being aware that that's what's happening.
Mm, wow. And let's be real here, as a young child or as a young adult, being in those relationships where you are looking for the evidence, you are looking for the love, you're looking for that acceptance, that does become our new norm, the new norm
Hmm.
for a lot of people, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So now you are, of course, a very passionate advocate, as I mentioned, and being an abuse recovery mentor. You've put the pain that you have gone through into a passion for helping others. When did it occur to you? In other words, when did it occur to you when you're in the transition phase of trying to do something for yourself and to help others? Did you realize, ah, I have a story to share. Maybe what I've been through can help others. Like, how did that populate?
Well, that's kind of a funny story because the person who helped me on my journey, I got my certificate in life coaching and in NLP, and I was going to start my new life as an NLP life coach, helping women. But every woman who came to me was in some sort of dysfunctional relationship or had experienced several dysfunctional relationships. And I thought, this is really weird. This is really weird. I'm not even putting it out there. I'm not even talking about myself. I'm just saying, hey, I'll help you, sort out your life kind of thing. And that's when I started to realize that there was a need for me to speak and to use my voice to say, hey, I went through this horrible experience. And I'm now way over here, and this is how I did it. This was my journey. These were the tools and resources that I used, that I developed, that I still use today, not as frequently, obviously, that I can give to you, that I can gift to you to help you. So it was kind of accidental that women kept saying to me, oh, I'm in this horrible relationship. And I think, oh, I've been there. You know, so that's how I ended up doing it, and it's been the greatest feeling for me to be able to share my story. At first, I was very reluctant. I'll be quite honest. I would think to myself, who
Mhm.
wants to hear this? But now I understand there's a lot of women who feel stuck.
Mhm.
and they need someone to voices of women who have been there, done that, and got out.
Wow, I got the chills when you said that. Like, think about where, and I go back and I'm seeing you sitting in the furnace room, okay? Sitting in the furnace room to where you are today and using your voice to share those painful experiences to help others and falling into something that maybe you didn't even see coming.
No, no, no. I just, it was not my intention. I'm glad that the universe or whomever jumped in and said, you have an important story to tell. You have an important healing journey to share, and you could help others. I think there's I don't know how to, yeah, okay. There's a bad thing happening out in the domestic violence world where women and men who have been in abusive relationships compare themselves to each other in a way to diminish their own story. Well, my story isn't as bad as hers, so I'm not going to talk about it. And I want everyone who is listening, it doesn't matter. Your story is your story. It's important. You were abused. That's it. That's all you need to know. It doesn't have to have a label. It doesn't have to have um, intensity. If you were abused verbally or mentally or psychologically, that counts. And I did that too. I thought, oh, but there's women who have had horrific physical abuse done to them. How can I compare? Why is my story important? Their story is much more valid than mine. And I'm here to say that's not true. That's not true at all. All of our stories are valid. And that's where my um how would you describe it? My reluctance to share my story, because I didn't think it had enough power or passion or validity to share compared to other stories, which is a whole bunch of nonsense. Abuse is abuse is abuse.
Right. And, that's what's so important to me about, I always say to someone, someone's out there waiting to hear your story. And you just nailed it. Why is your story important? Because it is important. It's a valid feeling. Obviously, today we're talking about the experience, unfortunately, of domestic violence, being a survivor, but to share that lived experience and to confirm that your story is valid. Abuse is abuse.
Correct. That is the most powerful thing that I want to share with everyone, because don't stand back and say, oh, well, it was only this or only that. Mm-mm. If you were financially abused and left in $100,000 worth of debt and you're struggling, that's abuse. That's valid.
Again, you bring up something really important that I'd like to kind of touch upon. When someone is in that mold of where they are in their story and excuse me, and they hear your success story, you had to rise up. You had to show up for yourself. So you wake up one morning, and I'm just kind of I'm imagining you waking up on a particular morning, getting out of bed and saying, okay, biatches, I'm here and this is what I'm going to do. But that must have been where you were emotionally. That must have been so hard for you to rise up and show up for yourself. What are some tips that you can share right now that somebody listening to this will go, okay, she's got a great story and I want to work with her or reach out to her. What is something I can do for myself right now?
Well, the very first thing I'm going to say is it's going to be scary, really, really scary. And your heart's going to race and you're going to think, I can't do this. I can't do this. I want you to step into that and say, yes, I can. And I know that that sounds really inane and stupid and all of that stuff, but you have to step into that. the first piece to all of this, before you get to boundaries or standards or values or any of that kind of stuff, the very first key to all of this is acceptance. Acceptance of where you are now, acceptance that you were abused, using that word, because a lot of us skirt that word. We go, oh yeah, well, he wasn't very nice, and oh, it was a little toxic. No, you need to accept and use these words and put them in your head so you are very aware of them. Accept that you have a gap. What that gap is, you're not too sure right now, but you're working on it. And then I want you to, once you accept all of these things, and you can write in your journal, I accept. I accept where I am right now. I accept I was abused. I accept that I am broke. I accept all of these things. Because once you accept it and you go into that place, you find a certain peace. You're no longer fighting with yourself. You're just going, yes, this is what it is. And the next piece to that, it's very powerful. And I know we all know about affirmations, but when
Mhm.
you are in a very bad place, a very limited place emotionally, you're wrecked, you're having a hard time, I want you to add an extra piece to your affirmations that will help you. So instead of saying, I am beautiful, or I am worthy, or I am capable, or any of those things, because when you're in a weakened place, your
Mhm.
brain will argue back and say, no, you're not. You know, you're not pretty. You know, you're not capable. You know, you can't, because it's like the abuser's voice just playing out in your head. I want you to add, I am in the process of learning I am beautiful. I am in the process of accepting I am capable. When you put in I am learning, your brain goes, oh, okay, well, I guess we could do that. There's no argument anymore. There's no argument in that piece. So change your affirmations to put in I am in the process of, and then add what it is that you're learning or shifting or doing or being, and that will help you. And write them in your journal in that way until you feel powerful enough and your voice is strong enough to be able to stand in the mirror and say, hello, I am beautiful, and walk away without an argument. But you need to have that connector.
I love what you just said there about looking in the mirror. I am beautiful. Boom. That's it.
Boom.
No discussions. It's not up for debate.
Nope. Nope.
Wow. Before we sign off, Susan, how can our viewers and listeners connect with you further?
They can go to my website, which is recoveryafterabuse.ca.
Mhm.
I also have a YouTube channel, which is also recovery after abuse. Recovery after abuse on YouTube. But I think you can put Susan Ball recovery after abuse and then you'll find me. And I also have Facebook. So, and it is also recovery after abuse. So any of those three places you will find me.
Oh, wonderful. And of course, I will make sure that gets in the show notes. I, of course, have, took a look at all of your social media channels and loved your YouTube channel and, how you really enlighten everyone with the hope that there is life after abuse and that their story matters.
And your voice matters. Ladies, speak up, speak your truth, speak your story, put it out there, and focus forward.
Oh, I love that focus forward. Let me ask you, Susan, before we sign off, what is one focus forward thing that is maybe on your to-do list or something that's out there that you want to achieve to maybe help others do the same?
I am, okay, me personally, for my personal benefit, there is, I want to help women understand that a lot of what we do, we have been conditioned to believe is what we should do. And I want to break some of those stories down and those social scripts, as I call them, down so that women feel empowered, free, and unapologetic to live the life they want to live instead of the one, or as I call it, their should life. Because I suffered from that. And that was a big issue in why I was in all of these bad relationships. Because in my growing up, I was conditioned to believe that women had to get married in order to be valid kind of thing. But That's not true. It was just conditioning and messaging. So, you know, that's what I want to put out there. That is one of my focus forward initiatives.
Oh, wow. I really love that. And thank you so much for sharing that. You have been such an inspiration, and I know that you will continue to be an inspiration to those women who listen to the podcast or maybe watch the YouTube video, wherever you listen to your podcast. Your voice will resonate with so many women out there. And I want to thank you so much for sharing your raw, vulnerable story and really breaking it down in a way where maybe outsiders as well as insiders can really understand why we do what we do and how we can help ourselves to get out of that and focus forward.
Thank you so much for having me and letting me share.
You are so welcome. Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed Susan's words. Her story is such an inspiration, and please reach out to her if you have any questions or concerns or need a little bit further direction. Like I said, I'll make sure all of her contact information in the show notes. And just remember, your focus forward is about sharing your story because guess what? Your voice matters. My name is Janice Malillo, the host of Stories That Inspire Us. Today, inspired by my amazing guest, Susan. Thank you all so much, and we shall see you again real soon. Bye for now.
Hey, everyone.